Okay, let's get started talking about HTML or Hypertext Markup language and learning a little bit more about what it looks like and how it's progressed. So from the Chapter 1 folder, I've opened the file called Chapter 1 HTML. It's actually a PDF file, so you'll need Adobe Acrobat or the free Adobe Reader to open it. So let's go ahead and get started. Hypertext Markup Language, or HTML, is the main markup language we use for building web pages. HTML elements are the basic building blocks of the web pages. HTML consists of elements also known as tags that are enclosed in angle brackets within the web page content itself. HTML normally comes in pairs, one tag to turn something on and one to turn it off. For example, let's take a closer look. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see that I have the HTML tag. The HTML tag is simply HTML within angle brackets, and the close HTML tag has a / in front of it. So whenever you see a / at the beginning of a tag, that's telling the browser to end some formatting. So typically the HTML tag is the first tag you see in your source code. That tells the browser, hey, an HTML page or web page is coming. And the one that is the close HTML tag tells the browser, hey, we're finishing up with this page, we're just about done. Over here is an example of the bold tag. So if you have some text you're placing on your web page and you want to make some of it bold, you would put the bold tag right in front of where you want the text to become bold, and the end bold tag would go right where you want the bolding to stop. And by the way, a good resource that I like for learning about HTML in general, and more specifically HTML5, is www.w3schools.com. It's a great resource. So let's dive in and look a little bit closer at HTML tags. We also have things called attributes and values. So you can see here I've got the link tag within the angle brackets, but I've also put things called attributes and values in here. So an attribute is an option for that tag, and then the value tells you which option we used. HTML code is not case sensitive, by the way. I use it here to differentiate tags visually. For example, some hand coders like to make the actual tag name caps and use lowercase for the rest of it. Now, you're typically not going to be writing all your own code. You'll be using a program like Dreamweaver, but it is good to understand if you need to go in and look at the source code and get an understanding of what all these things mean. So in this particular example, I've got the link tag. I've added an attribute and I've added a value, and here's another attribute and another value. You'll notice that the attributes within the same tag are separated with a word space, and the values are entered within quote marks. HTML allows images and objects to be embedded and can be used to create interactive forms as well. So here's an example of the image tag. It's simply the letters IMG inside the angle brackets. But you have to tell it a few things, and one of the main ones is an attribute called source. So SRC is the source attribute, and that's telling the browser which photo you want to use, and in some cases you have to tell it where that photo is located. So here, source equals, and notice it's in quotations, beanblossom.jpg. That's the actual name of my photo, which happens to be this beautiful photo right here. Sometimes we have other attributes such as the alt tag. The alt tag is useful for if your user, for whatever reason, turns off graphics in their browser, or if for some reason the link gets broken, at least a line of text will appear to tell them what was supposed to show on that page. Typically that doesn't happen, but just in case it does, you can add an alt tag. A more important reason to add an alt tag would be for Section 508 compliance. So if someone who is viewing your content is handicapped and is unable to read the content or see the images on screen, they use a machine called a screen reader. In this particular case, the screen reader would tell them that the Bean Blossom Bridge photo was supposed to appear here since they are unable to view it themselves. So the source attribute defines the image name, and the image tag can have attributes such as height, width, and alt as well. We've added two. We've added source and alt, but there are other ones you can add as well. Web browsers can also refer to cascading style sheets, or CSS, to define the appearance and layout of text and other materials. So cascading style sheets is a simple mechanism for adding style, such as fonts, color, and spacing to web documents. It's very similar to a program like InDesign or even Word that uses styles to lay out the content. So you might have headline, body copy, photo caption. If you were working with a print document, it's the same basic concept here. Style sheets can be applied to web pages in two different ways. They can be applied within the document itself at the exact spot where they're needed, or a file containing all of the CSS commands can be linked externally to the web page. So for example, to make the background of this web page this beautiful shade of blue, this is what it would look like in HTML code, and this is what it would look like in CSS. Both get us the same end result, we just use different symbols and different coding to get there. The W3C, or World Wide Web Consortium, maintains both HTML and CSS standards. They encourage the use of CSS to maintain consistency. The World Wide Web Consortium is an international community that developed open standards to ensure the long-term growth of the web. You can go to their website and read more about their mission at www.w3.org. The World Wide Web Consortium meets regularly to discuss and set standards for OneWeb, which includes desktop, mobile, and print. HTML5, the latest version of Hypertext markup language, is still in its infancy here today in 2011. HTML4 has been around for almost a decade now, and developers seeking new techniques to provide enhanced functionality are being held back by the constraint of language and browsers. So to give developers more flexibility and interoperability, and enable more interactive and exciting websites and applications to be created, HTML5 introduces and enhances a wide range of features, including form controls, APIs, multimedia, structure, and semantics. New features have been introduced to help web developers, and new elements have been introduced based on extensive research, including tips from people who are developing, things they're trying to get the browser to show and aren't appearing properly, so new tags are developed all the time. Here are some examples of some tags that are supported in HTML5. Some of them are new, such as the aside tag and the canvas tag. Some have been around for a while and have just been refined. So that's a little bit of background information on working with HTML, and as we progress, we'll learn more about what tags are used specifically with HTML5. In this lesson, let's talk about the main parts of a web page, or more specifically for what we're covering in this workshop, the main parts of a blog. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, when you're dealing with the HTML code, the source code for the document, there are really just two sections, the head section and the body section. The head section contains all the invisible things that make the page actually work, like metadata or cascading style sheets or JavaScript. The only thing in the head section that's actually visible on the page is the title. So at the very top of your web browser, when you go to a web page, it might say welcome to Park County, Indiana, or welcome to whatever the name of the company's site is. That's the title, and that's the only visible part that's located in the head section. Everything else that you see on a web page is in the body section. So graphics, text, buttons, any multimedia like movies, those are all in the body section of the website. Here I have a snapshot of a website. It happens to be mine, which is called creatable.com. And I thought I'd use this to show you some basic parts of a website, or in this case, as I said, a blog website. All of these things can be in different places, but they're all just basic things that are usually on most websites. Starting with the header. The header section is typically at the top of the page, which is why it's called the header. But it can contain logos. Mine has my company logo. It also has the Adobe Community Professional logo. It can also contain a welcome message about your website, perhaps a tagline. It can contain links. Sometimes there are external or internal links existing right inside the header. The next section is the nav bar. In my case, my nav bar is located below the header. Sometimes it's down the left-hand column. Sometimes it's above the header. It can be at the bottom of the page. It can be a number of different places. But the nav bar is really one of the best working parts of your website because it's what people are going to use to navigate through your site. So it contains external and internal links. Internal links meaning links that go to other pages or other parts of pages within your site. And external links would be linking to, in my case, perhaps to adobe.com or perhaps to another company that I'm doing business with or something like that, maybe a sponsor. The body section is the main bulk of the website. That's where, in our case, all the blog postings will be listed, perhaps a calendar of events, any graphics that pertain to the stories that you're posting. Those will all be listed in the body section. And then finally, there's the footer. And in my case, the footer is empty, but in a lot of cases, the footer might have some copyright information, perhaps a blurb or a tagline about the website, perhaps some external links, or maybe even a couple logos. So those are some of the basic parts that you find on most web pages. Now I want to take you in and show you an actual website and some actual code. So I'm going to go down here first to my browser. I'm using Chrome, and this is what my website looks like when you see it online. But I'm going to go under View and go to Developer and choose View Source. Now this is how I get to it on Chrome, but all browsers allow you to view the source code. You just have to find it in your drop-down menu. And again, in Chrome, it's View, Developer, View Source. So this is the source for all of my content on my website. It looks a little intimidating at first, but I just want to show you that you can break it down and kind of get a closer look at it. The HTML tag is always the first tag that you see because that tells the browser that a web page is coming. And at the very bottom of the page, the very last tag is the end HTML tag. So whenever you see that /, that tells it to end whatever action was happening. And then we have the head section. So here's the head tag, and this goes all the way down until we begin the body section. So there's the end head, and there's the beginning of the body section. So what I used to create this was my HTML editor of choice, which is Adobe Dreamweaver. You can use whatever you want, but all of this code was all written for me. I would not want to have to go in and create all this myself. Here's the title. So this is the title tag. Here's what is in my title tag, and then here is the end title tag. So creatable.com is what you see at the top of my site. Here it is right here, and that's what's contained within that title tag. So at first glance, this looks a little intimidating, but we're going to learn more about it as we go. Just to show you, for example, in this HTML tag, this is an attribute and this is a value. This is an attribute and this is a value, and here's another attribute and another value. So we'll be talking more about these throughout this course, but I wanted to just give you a quick run through of the basic parts of a web page and then show you the code so it's not so intimidating. In this lesson, let's go ahead and take a look at creating a snippet of code, our first HTML code. So I'm using something called BBEdit, where we're creating a text file and saving it with an HTML extension. So really, you could use any text editor. You could create a web page in WordPad or Word or whatever you like. I'm using BBEdit, which is a relatively inexpensive one that's available for the Mac. And I've opened from our Chapter 1 folder indexstart.html and indexfinished.html. So the start file is the one that we're going to alter, and I have the finished one open to show you what we're going to end up with. Basically, our code is written in here for us already. The beginning section tells the browser that it is an HTML file. Here's the start of our head section. Here's our title, the end of our head section, the beginning of the body, a few lines of text, and then the end of the body section, and then the end of the HTML page. So it's very basic, but I wanted to at least get you started with creating a little bit of code. Actually, in this case, we're just going to be adding the text, and then you can view it in a browser. So I'm going to take you out and show you in the browser. This is what the finished one is going to look like. It has Welcome to Park County, Indiana at the top as our title. It has I love covered bridges, and covered bridges is in bold. And then Park County is the covered bridge capital of the world. Riveting, I realize, but it's just a basic beginner course. So let's get started in our BBEdit, or whatever you choose to work on these basic HTML files in. And I'm starting with the start file. So I have text indicated in here. Any place you see the word text, it means that we're going to type something in there. So I'm going into the title section and I'm going to start by typing "Welcome to Park County." And Park does have an E on the end in this particular case, Park County, Indiana. And then down under where the next text section is, we're going to type "I love." And then the next one is inside the strong tag, which means it's going to come out bold. We're going to type "covered bridges" and an exclamation point. And then our final text one at the bottom, we're just going to type "Park County is the covered bridge capital of the world." And then save it. And again, when we go out and preview it in our browser, this is what we get. So again, our title at the top, "I love covered bridges," and then Park County is the covered bridge capital of the world. So that's really our very first look at actually going in and typing something within the code. It's very basic, but you should have a better understanding now of what HTML code looks like as we move forward. In this lesson, let's talk about what happens when you use your browser to go and request a web page. What's really happening behind the scenes? I'm just going to give you a basic understanding of what's going on. The first thing that happens is your browser connects to the server and requests the page. So when you type the URL into the field in your browser and hit enter or return, your browser is actually connecting to a server somewhere else in the world and trying to get that page. So this is your computer, and this is it connecting to the web server. The second thing that happens is your server sends back the requested page. So the server that you've connected to now is sending back the page and displaying it within the browser on your computer. So the HTML is the computer language that is used to describe everything that's appearing on the page. So all of the colors, the typefaces that are being used, where everything is placed on the page, any graphics, they're all described with this language called HTML, or Hypertext Markup language. The web browser is a piece of software on your computer that uses a web server to pull that page through the network to your computer. So basically that web browser is the thing that is the catalyst, basically, that's being used to view the content you're trying to get to. And the web server stores the web pages similar to what a filing cabinet would do, so that whenever you want them, whenever you request it, that web server can give permission for that information to be sent to your computer and be viewed in that web browser. That's just a basic understanding of what's going on behind the scenes when you're working with web pages and trying to view them with your web browser. Let's review browser trends in this lesson. That is, to talk about the major browsers that are being used in the marketplace today. Because as a web designer, you need to know that information. You need to know what browsers are being used so that you can prepare your web designs to show perfectly inside those browsers, or as perfectly as we can. So let's get started talking about the 5 major browsers that are in use today. Firefox has the most circulation with 40.6% of the market share, followed by Google's Chrome, which has 30.3% of people in the world using it. 22.4% of people in the world are using Internet Explorer by Microsoft. Apple's Safari has 3.8% of the market share, and rounding out the top 5 browsers is Opera, which has 2.3% of the market share. So some things to remember when you're working with different types of browsers and preparing your content. You always want to test your content in multiple browsers. Different browsers can display things such as submit buttons and other content differently, so you definitely want to take a look at it in as many different browsers as you can. Now, Adobe makes a program called Device Central that also allows you to see your content on different mobile devices, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment, but that's another good way of being able to view your content and eliminate as many variables as possible. Testing your content on different platforms such as Windows and Mac is always a good idea. Colors can shift and look different. And also, back to the submit buttons and other pieces of content on your web page can definitely look different, depending not only on the browser that you're in, but also on the platform that you're in. And finally, testing your content on mobile is really a good idea. And as I mentioned, that Device Central by Adobe is a great feature of Adobe software to be able to go in and view your content exactly as it's going to look on a variety of different mobile devices, such as different types of phones, iPhones, Motorola, whatever. So it's always a good idea to test it on multiple browsers, multiple platforms, and also see your content on mobile as well. So this is just a little bit of a review of the different types of browsers that are out there. So as you're moving forward, you can keep in mind what your content is going to look like in every one of them.